things later on.
Yeah, right.
I've had a week of a lot of repentance. Let's put it that way. How crazy is our flesh? How crazy can, if we do not tame our flesh, we could go off the deep end. It happened to me this week. Let me go ahead and pray. Father, I just pray that I will decrease so you can increase. Father, I pray that you will speak what you want to be said, Father. And I pray that there's that everyone will chime in as well if you lead them to chime in, Father. And I just thank you and I praise you in Yeshua's name, amen. So remember, I'll just give you a reminder that when we do our lesson, we base it off the fact that you guys have read as well. So hopefully you guys are reading, at least so you can give some input or input. So we're going to start off, before I get into my confessions, we're going to start off with a little word from our little friend here. Oh, hold on. I think I did it wrong. All right.
Well, g'day guys, welcome to week number 20 of our chronological Bible reading plan. We are well and truly deep into the life of David. Got another week or two left as we finish our focus on King David. Last week we read about the drama that came about through his affair, or double war, whatever we call it, with Bathsheba, Uriah's wife, and the birth of Solomon. What was very much a private issue became very public, and whether that's because David was a public figure, or whether that was because he lived in a culture that traded very heavily on shame, on shaming, on guilt and shame, dishonour and honour. We saw that theme last week of dishonour and honour come out through our readings quite a lot. Either way, what was very much was a personal issue to begin with, became very public and affected a lot of people. Well, guess what? This week, it just gets worse. We're going to see more drama in the life of David, more drama in his personal family life, that then translates and ends up almost having a civil war in the entire kingdom that he leads. So that's the big story of what we're going to be reading this week. This week we're reading 9 chapters of 2 Samuel, 13 and 21, and we're also reading 20 Psalms, 19 of which, almost all, of which are written by David and describe the great emotion that this drama this week goes through. Alright, so I don't want to give too much away, but here we go. I want to get your head in the right space as we approach the readings this week. The main thing we really need to know and be reminded of before we head into this week's readings is the complexity of David's family life. At this point in history, get this, David has at least 8 wives. At least. The first one was Michal, Saul's daughter. You remember King Saul said, hey, whoever kills Goliath can have my daughter. All right, and then he said to David, well, if you really want Michal, you need to kill 100 Philistines and bring their foreskins to me. Okay, so that he married Michal out of that, and although she got shifted to another husband when David was on the run, David ends up taking her back, and he is wife number 1. 2 Samuel chapter 3, we read a few weeks ago. It tells us that David, after her, had another 6 wives, and he had various kids through them, and they sort of came to David around the time when he was on the run from Saul and ending up starting to build his kingdom. And then last week, of course, we saw him marry Bathsheba after when King Solomon was born. So that is 8 wives, and guess what? He might have even had more, because 2 Samuel chapter 5 tells us that when he was in Jerusalem, he acquired more wives. Not only that, but he's got a bunch of concubines. Now, this is just a recipe for disaster, okay? And guess what? The other thing is, it is in direct violation of the warning that Moses gave hundreds of years earlier in Deuteronomy chapter 17, when God's people were about to go into the promised land, and he prophesied over them and said, guys, listen, in the future, one day you're going to ask for a king. But that king needs to make sure he does not take many wives for himself, or it will not go well for him. And guess what? David does not heed that advice. And so we end up with the drama that we are going to see this week. Essentially what we see this week is a drama, as I keep saying, between 2 of David's sons, okay? They're brothers, or they're half-brothers. And one of them, tragically, terribly, ends up raping, or chooses strategizes on raping one of his half-sisters. The brother of the sister finds out about this. His name is Absalom, and as you would expect, he is absolutely furious and wants to destroy that half-brother. David finds out about this. He knows this has gone on, and yet he does nothing. He says nothing. It's like he puts his head in the sand and completely ignores the situation. His own daughter was raped. His own son had done it. And yet David does nothing. And of course what this does over the years, as you understand, is it just pours fuel onto Absalom's fire, and he ends up taking matters into his own hands. He avenges his sister's rape, and then ultimately what he does is he schemes to bring David down. So rooted is the bitterness in his heart that he works out a way that he schemes his way into betraying his own father and trying to snatch the kingdom from him. And so this family issue, okay, ends up almost having a civil war, where David ends up running for his life from Absalom and his friends, and this war breaks out between David and Absalom. And while this war breaks out between David and Absalom, another war rears its head, where followers of King Saul think, well, this is our opportunity, let us try to take the throne from David. So David's just getting it now from both sides. The point, of course, of the lesson in this is that the micro affected the macro, okay? What David did not contain well in his own family affected very much his jurisdiction as a leader. And there's many lessons in fathering and parenting and confrontation and critical conversations that can come about through this week's reading. So I trust that you read it well and learn some of those lessons. Betrayal, of course, is something that's not new to David. You remember that betrayal, that David was betrayed often by King Saul, by someone who said that he loved him, his own son-in-law, okay, and then would regularly and consistently betray him. But, I just couldn't help thinking this week that these issues of betrayal, these two examples, are quite different. Because when it came to Saul's betrayal, David really had nothing to do with that. His heart was innocent. He was consistently doing the right thing by King Saul. And it's almost like he couldn't help that situation get better. It was really King Saul's issue. But I can't help thinking this week, as I read about the betrayal of Absalom, that David could have avoided a lot of the sting of that. And he could have avoided a lot of the severity of that had he had just had an honest conversation with his family. And so while he goes through a similar challenge, I believe the wisdom in the story is that it is something that could have been avoided. And I also wonder whether, again, we see the power of shame and the power of wanting to keep face, all right, that stopped David from interacting well with his sons and therefore allowing this war to break out. But at the end of the day, what happens is that David, despite all the war, Absalom against him, and the house of Saul still follows the Saul of Benjamites coming out against him. Amongst all of that, David still retains his throne and still lives in Jerusalem in the palace, because at the end of the day, God ultimately is the one in charge of the kingdom. Okay? And God will not allow anyone to usurp the throne unless he first says so, like he did with King Saul. All right? But nevertheless, David suffers a great deal of collateral damage, both physical pain, politically he suffers, and definitely emotionally. This tears David apart. And that is where the Psalms come in this week and really shine for us, because a lot of that pain comes out in David's song. So you'll be happy to know this week that 19 out of the 20 Psalms we're going to be reading are written by David, and they all seem to match, okay, the story that we're reading. So this actually works really, really well this week, reading the drama in Samuel and then the Psalms that David writes. And I want you to keep your eye out for key words that David uses this week that speaks about Absalom and speaks about the usurping of his throne by the other people of Saul's family. He speaks about evildoers ambushing him, those he once trusted and close to him betraying his trust. He talks about them scheming downfall, lying, tricking, deceiving, speaking good with their mouths, but devising evil plans in their hearts. All these words come out in the Psalms this week. And of course, through it all, despite all the suffering that David goes through and all the emotional heartache, almost all of the Psalms finished with him declaring his trust and his praise in God. And so this is probably a good place, and I'll finish with this. This is probably a good place for me to talk a little bit to you about the book of Psalms and putting the book of Psalms in its context. Okay, so here again is the big picture when it comes to the book of Psalms. Essentially, the Psalms was collated over many, many years of Hebrew and Jewish editing, okay? And it was divided into 5 main books and 5 main sections. One of the theories of that is that maybe because Moses' books, the Torah, was one book, but written in 5, or divided into 5, okay? Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Maybe that's why the Hebrew authors took the book of Psalms, 150, and they divided it into 5. That's just a theory, I'm not sure of that, but it's basically the same thing. The word Psalms comes from the Greek word. The word in the Hebrew literally means praises. Okay, so you could also call it the book of praises. There's 150 all up, as I just mentioned. About half of them are written by David. Okay? About a third of them are written by unknown people. We don't know exactly who wrote them. And the rest are written by guys like the sons of Korah and Asaph, etc. You're going to see their names this week. About a third of the Psalms are directed, and you'll see this in the editorial notes, they're directed to somebody called the director of music, which basically tells us that that psalm, for sure, had musical accompaniment to it. So it had instruments that played with it. And in fact, every now and again when you see the beginning of a psalm, you will also see that it says, to the tune of something. So it even mentions the song name or the music, the name of the music that goes with those particular words. So while not all of the psalms may have been sung, and some that may just be poetry, we know that a good portion of them had music written to them. The most common form of psalms, there's basically 2 really common forms, and it's the songs of praise and songs of lament. Okay, so basically, happy, sad. And you see a lot of the sad ones this week, they're lamenting psalms, okay? Songs of praise, or songs of thanksgiving, and songs of lament. Over a third of them are songs of praise, over a third of the psalms are songs of lament. And both of them can be either individual, so the individual is crying out to God, or the individual is saying something like, I praise you. And some of them are collective, so they're written for a congregation. So it's not as common in the laments. Most of the laments are very personal, as you'll see this week. But every now and then you'll come across one where the nation or a community of people laments because of how the status of their nation as a whole. Okay, so they're both communal and individual. And of course, then there's other psalms that I mentioned before that have a lot of historical recall in them, that are prophetic or petitioning or prophesy or prayers, etc., etc. And this comes into the New Testament, where Ephesians tells us to sing to one another with all kinds of hymns and all kinds of psalms. Lastly, typically the psalms, like our form of poetry today, use language, okay, the genre of the psalms, very much uses language that is highly emotional and therefore often very exaggerated or metaphoric, okay, illustrative language. And so we need to be careful at times not to take every word of the Psalms as meaning something literal, okay? This week you're going to read about God taking people under his wings. And that doesn't literally mean that God's a bird, okay? That God has wings. It's a metaphor. It's an image of talking that Jesus himself later borrowed about God bringing people close to himself. So we aren't supposed to take every word literally because that's the nature of poetry. It is metaphoric. But the one different thing about poetry in the ancient Near Eastern poetry today is often our poetry in English, we use poetry to rhyme. Well, they didn't really do that much in the ancient Near East, but one of the things they often do is they use repetition or parallelism in their poetry. So you especially notice this in the opening verses of some psalms, where you'll say one thing and then basically repeat it with slightly different language or a different metaphor, saying the one thing but saying it twice, or sometimes even 3 or 4 times. You keep repeating something, right? So that's called parallelism. It's part of the ancient Near Eastern form of poetry. So I hope that helps a little, just to give you an idea. The big picture of the book of Psalms, but also some specific things to look out for. Okay, guys? Enjoy your drama this week. Don't let it depress you. Okay? It's like days of our lives. It's like reading a soap opera, honestly. So get what you can out of it. I trust Holy Spirit speaks to you this week, and particularly if you enjoy the Psalms as well. Bless you lots, and I'll see you next week, where I think we finish off our focus on David, and particularly, I know we're going to finish off the book of Samuel, but not yet, just read those 9 chapters. Bless you lots, and see you later. Boom!
I had a hard time this week with the very first one, Samuel 13. It got me on so many levels. Me and Dad was talking about that this morning, kind of. Let's just get into it and we'll talk afterwards, because I don't know if I can get through it. So what? And I told you, when I watch a movie, I try to put myself in their shoes so that I can feel what they're feeling. And I think that's how, when we're supposed to read, put ourselves in their shoes so you can grasp exactly what they're feeling. And this one just, it gets me every time. So I want you to think about this. Who's had a diary? Is it a woman thing? I mean, I know that I write stuff down, like I write stuff through music and stuff, but when I read Psalms, to me, it's like a diary. But it's a diary for the whole world to see. It's like he said, praise and lamenting, crying out, praise, crying out, praise. The emotions that you have are a real thing. And I think it's okay for you to express those emotions to God. I think that's much better than putting on plastic and just throwing it under the rug and not saying anything. That brings me to this point. The event happens, and David, because he does not like confrontation, because who likes confrontation? Especially within your family, does not do anything about it, does not even speak about it, and then it just causes a whole spiral effect. Maybe if David would have addressed the issue and not just let it go under the rug, there would be no revenge, there would be no buildup, there would be no family chaos. It's possible. I know that there's aspects of my life with my children, my older children, that I have been a little afraid to address, or that I haven't addressed, maybe that I should have addressed. They're still my children. I'm still their father. I need to be a man, and there's certain things that I should probably let them know. But because of things in the past, it's kind of hindered me on the route that I should take, but I know that I should take some route at some point here in the future. So a lack of making a choice to go speak to somebody could cause a whole spiral effect. A matter of fact, a sin, one little sin that you do could cause a whole spiral effect to not just you, but everybody in your family. You guys agree with that?
Yeah, it reminds me of I think it's a proverb that says, open rebuke is better than secret love. So we say we love the person. We don't want to ruffle any feathers. We don't want to go there. It's uncomfortable feeling. So I'll just pray and God will do something. And when we probably have something we should say, open rebuke. It means you go to him and you tell him, hey, this is out of order. This is not right.
So David, a man after God's own heart, could not go and discuss what had happened. So 2 years went by, and just imagine if that was you, and that happened to your sibling, your human nature is going to kick in. It's just going to build up and build up and build up. And it could, like you said, it could have easily been avoided, possibly, if we just went. That might have still happened, but at least he could have went and had that part. I probably bet if he went and spoke, said what he had to say, tried to get it under control, because doesn't it say keep your household in order?
Yeah, it does.
So there's a reason to keep your household in order. It just, one mistake can cause a whole things to happen, a bunch of things to happen. So we're going to try to get into 1 Samuel 13, and if I cry like a bunch, just forgive me. But I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of what's going on here. So here we're gonna read 13. Or listen.
After this, Absalom, the son of David, had a lovely sister, whose name was Tamar, and Amnon, the son of David, loved her. Amnon was so distressed over his sister Tamar that he became sick, for she was a virgin, and it was improper for Amnon to do anything to her. But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shimeah, David's brother. Now Jonadab was a very crafty man, and he said to him,
"Why are you, the king's son, becoming thinner day after day? Will you not tell me?"
Amnon said to him,
"I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister."
Lie down on your bed and pretend to be ill. And when your father comes to see you, say to him, "Please let my sister Tamar come and give me food and prepare the food in my sight, that I may see it and eat it from her hand."
Then Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. And when the king came to see him, Amnon said to the king,
"Please, let Tamar, my sister, come and make a couple of cakes for me in my sight, that I may eat from her hand."
And David sent home to Tamar.
Now go to your brother Amnon's house and prepare food for him.
So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house, and he was lying down. Then she took flour and kneaded it, made cakes in his sight, and baked the cakes. And she took the pan and placed them out before him. But he refused to eat.
Let everyone go out for me.
And they all went out from him. Then Amnon said to Tamar,
"Bring the food into the bedroom, that I may eat from your hand."
And Tamar took the cakes which she had made and brought them to Amnon her brother in the bedroom. Now, when she had brought them to him to eat, he took hold of her.
"Come, lie with me, my sister."
My brother! Do not force me, for no such thing should be done in Israel. Do not do this disgraceful thing, and I will not take my shame. And as for you, you would be like one of the fools in Israel. Now, therefore, please speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you.
However, he would not heed her voice, and being stronger than she, he forced her and lay with her. Then Amnon hated her exceedingly, so that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he had loved her. And Amnon said to her,
"Arise, be gone."
No, indeed. This evil of sending me away is worse than any other that you did to me.
but he would not listen to her. Then he called his servant to attend him.
"Here, put this woman out. Away from me, and bolt the door behind her."
Now, she had on a robe of many colors, for the king's virgin daughters wore such a gown. And his servant put her out and bolted the door behind her. Then Tamar put ashes on her head, and tore her robe of many colors that was on her, and laid her hand on her head, and went away crying bitterly. And Absalom, her brother, said to her,
Has Amnon your brother been with you? But no, peace, my sister. He is your brother. Do not take this thing to heart.
So Tamar remained desolate in her brother Absalom's house. But when King David heard of all these things, he was very angry. And Absalom spoke to his brother Abner, neither good nor bad. For Absalom hated Abner, because he had forced his sister Tamar.
I don't even know what to say. That's like real life stuff. It's like something you see in a movie. The flesh of a man. I'm just gonna talk about the man for a second. Like, you know that it's wrong. Like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. Then somebody comes along, comes up with this plan. You go through with the plan, you're laying there, this poor woman comes in, has no clue what's going on, thinks she's doing something awesome by bringing them all this stuff. And if you're forcefully going to do that, the flesh is so crazy. That's why it's so important to walk in the Spirit. We have something even more than what they had back then. We actually have the Holy Spirit. It says don't even go serve bread. They couldn't even go serve bread without being baptized in the Spirit, without being filled with the Spirit. We have an extra benefit that they didn't even actually have back then. But it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out how wrong that was. So here we go. Let's talk about a man for a second. A lot of men are the reason why the court system is the way that it is. I'm just going to say it. Because a man will go do what he's got to do, and then he won't take responsibility. So a lot of the reasons why a man goes into the court system when it comes to the child and stuff, and it's because a lot of men have been dogs. Let's just call it what it is. That's literally what it is. A lot of the reason why the world is screwed up is because a man wasn't being a man. Because what did you say this morning, Dad? It's what a man is. God is over the man. The man's over.
It says that the head of the man is Christ, and the head of the woman is the man. So God gave authority to protect the woman and to shield the woman and to guide the woman and to honor the woman and all that stuff. Of course, we're talking about marriage, but
yes,
still,
absolutely.
It's an order, and it even says that the woman's the weaker vessel. And the man should protect her and not take advantage.
He was all about fulfilling his desire for what he wanted at that time.
Yeah.
That's literally what just happened right there. Come up with some kind of scheme. It's just like you see in the movies. Back in the day when you used to watch movies, and they would come in and they would do the business, and then the man would just kick him out and they'd just leave. They'd treat him like a filthy rag, like that meant absolutely nothing to them. That's exactly what actually happened.
Oh, and he was so in love with her, and then when he forces her, then his shame made him hate her and throw her out.
And then imagine how she feels. Like she doesn't, like it's, like she feels like filth. Now listen, women have their thing that they do, but I'm just talking about the man at this moment. If men were men, and then you have David, again, a man after God's own heart that didn't want to deal with confrontation. And literally, this next part might have been avoided if he would have just dealt with it when it arises. It's those tough conversations that you have to have. Go ahead, Dave.
It's also interesting that she says, well, he won't withhold me from you. Go talk to David. When I'm going, well, I don't know. Would he or would he not?
Yeah, I don't. But like I put myself in there, and I'm like, it's like those people it's like those people that are serial killers and they do stuff after the fact. And I'm not going to get into detail. And I'm like, that's so demonic. That's so satanic. That's so like how does that even happen? And then you have somebody that knows better, which King David knows, and he doesn't want to say anything.
And see, I don't think this is demonic.
No, it's
flesh.
It's 100% flesh.
Because I think
I went to an extra.
Yeah, I know. Because I think a lot of times we as humans, the devil made me do it. When it's no, you made you do it. The flesh, you allowed your flesh to do it. He made it. He may have whispered. He may have enticed me. You did it.
So it could start off with something like this, and then you go on this murder spree, and then
Yeah.
it turns into this evil plot. All right, so I never planned on getting like that emotional about it, and I just started reading it, and I have such a big heart, and I think that's one thing I can say about me. It's probably it could be a bad thing and a good thing, but it just got to me because I'm not oblivious. Look, and I'm a man, but I'm not oblivious to how screwed up men have been towards women. Not saying that women don't have their things, because you guys have your little things that you guys do that that men have a hard time with. So I'm just saying, in this particular instance, if a man would have been a man, it might not even went to this whole other level that it's about to go to. So this is the beginning of family chaos now. It started in 13. Well, it actually started before that, but now it's really starting. So let's finish this.
Can I say something?
You absolutely can.
I'm not sure what I want to say. While we're sitting here, and I read this week, I've read this before, but just while we're sitting here going through all this, I thought, when David did what he did with Bathsheba, and he went through that whole process, the whole beginning to end, repentance, and then raised up his kids, I wonder if he told them. I wonder if he trained from that point, and I wonder if that's part of why he didn't speak when this all happened, because maybe them old, whatever you want to call it, demons or whatever, maybe he left a gateway open in his heart, or he had repent. I don't know, I don't need to say judge. I'm dealing with stuff in my own world and praying, Lord, show me where's things that maybe my family failed to teach me, not because they meant to fail me, but they just didn't know better in some cases. They weren't walking with the Lord. I just think about that as where it was when he came up against this with her and that feeling, because it wasn't love. I mean, that's what that was love.
Yeah,
they call it love in the
100%.
Bible. The translation, I don't know. I didn't study that part out, but I love her. No. His mind wasn't trained to work correctly and walk in the Spirit, or I don't know. It just makes me wonder.
No, I get
Did David train in that area?
Well, and you figured since David did what he did,
Was it
that at least he would at least. That's definitely that's not love whatsoever. It's 100% lust. Lust will destroy you. Lust has messed me up. Lust has probably messed everybody up at one point in time.
Maybe that's probably why he didn't say anything right away.
The
It was
se-
right. He should have done something. He was the father, he was the king, but maybe all this, it just probably brought, I don't know, stuff up that he went through when he did all that with Bathsheba. And, how can I speak to that? Maybe he thought, I don't know.
Well, I mean, even if he did, it doesn't make it right that he didn't say anything
No,
whatsoever.
Absolutely not.
And that's what I'm saying. Sometimes you got to have those hard conversations. This story really got me. It took me a while to even get past this part before I got to it. Because again, this stuff, you hear about this stuff all the time. You gonna say something?
I was just going to say, have you noticed all through the scripture, like father, like son?
Yes.
The father does something, the son does it. Mother does something, the daughter does it. I mean, it's just, it's in us. And that is a key. I think God made us that way. So we're supposed to imitate our Father who is in heaven and have his character.
There's 100% no question that there's generational curses based off of people's sin.
Yeah.
My sin affecting my children, my dad's sin, my grandfather's sin. But once you understand that there's generational curses, it's up to us to break those curses, go to God and have it with whatever it is. We can't just keep carrying that stuff around. And listen, I'm going to go a step further. I've never been in this situation. I've never been a lady going through this situation. But you have to break yourself free from staying in that situation. I have no right to say anything as far as actually going through that. but it is true. If you want to set yourself free, you have to give it over to God, and you have to learn to get the bitterness out, get all of that out. Bitterness will absolutely kill you. It's almost worse than taking drugs. Just being bitter all the time, it will hurt you.
So David actually provoked his son to have bitterness by not trying to deal with it.
Yes. But here's the crazy thing about David. We're going to get to this a little bit later that I found very fascinating about David. A characteristic that's not really talked about a lot when you talk about David. It's other things that you talk about, but we won't really talk about this other thing. So let's finish this. And if you have anything to say, by all means, please speak up.
And it came to pass, after 2 full years, that Absalom had sheep shearers in Baal Hazor, which is near Ephraim. So Absalom invited all the king's sons. Then Absalom came to the king.
Kindly note, your servant has sheep shearers. Please, let the king and his servants go with your servant. No, my son, let us not all go now, lest we be a burden to you.
Then he urged him, but he would not go, and he blessed him. Then Absalom said,
If not, please let my brother Amnon go with us. Why should he go with you?
But Absalom urged him. So he let Amnon and all the king's sons go with him. Now Absalom had commanded his servants,
Watch now. When Amnon's heart is merry with wine, and when I say to you, strike Amnon, then kill him. Do not be afraid. Have I not commanded you? Be courageous and valiant.
So the servants of Absalom did to Amnon as Absalom had commanded. Then all the king's sons arose, and each one got on his mule and fled. And it came to pass, while they were on their way, that news came to David.
Absalom has killed all the king's sons, and not one of them is left.
So the king arose and tore his garments and lay on the ground, and all his servants stood by with their clothes torn. Then Jonathan, the son of Shimeah, David's brother, answered,
Let not my lord suppose they have killed all the young men, the king's sons, for only Amnon is dead. For by the command of Absalom, this has been determined from the day that he forced his sister Tamar. Now therefore, let not my lord the king take this thing to his heart, to think that all the king's sons are dead, for only Amnon is dead.
Then Absalom fled. And the young man who was keeping watch lifted his eyes and looked, and there many people were coming from the road on the hillside behind him. And Jonadab said to the king,
Look, the king's sons are coming. As your servant said, so it is.
So it was, as soon as he had finished speaking, that the king's sons indeed came, and they lifted up their voice and wept. Also the king and all his servants wept very bitterly. But Absalom fled and went to Talmai, the son of Ammihud, king of Geshur. And David mourned for his son every day. So Absalom fled and went to Geshur, and was there 3 years. And King David longed to go to Absalom, for he had been comforted concerning Amnon, because he was dead.
Say something. I can't remember what I was going to say. All right. Here's a little breakdown. Oh, by the way, so in the midst of all of this, all the stuff that's going on, David goes back and he writes his diary. So he's writing Psalms. He's writing stuff in between this, lamenting, why is this happening? Why is this happening? But out of all of every time he's doing it, it's crazy, he never loses trust in Yahweh. He still trusts Yahweh. Even through all that stuff, he still trusts Yahweh. All right, so we'll just go over the overview real quick. I didn't put a voice to it this time, so you'll have to hear my lovely voice. Amnon's lust for Tamar. Amnon, David's eldest son, becomes infatuated with his half-sister Tamar. His desire for her turns into an unhealthy and sinful obsession. Jonadab's scheme. Amnon's friend. So there's deception, like from the schemes, deception, all the way from the beginning. Let's just go to 3. Amnon's sin against Tamar. Tamar compiles with Amnon's request to prepare food for him. We've already read that. Amnon's rejection. I don't have to go through that. I don't even want to go through this chapter anymore. It's just this. I don't like this one. Anybody have anything else about this one? All right, let's go to 14. It's not going to get any better either. The spiral has taken place.
So Joab, the son of Zeruiah, perceived that the king's heart was concerned about Absalom. And Joab sent to Tekoa and brought from there a wise woman.
Please, pretend to be a mourner and put on mourning apparel. Do not anoint yourself with oil, but act like a woman who has been mourning a long time for the dead. Go to the king and speak to him in this manner.
So Joab put the words in her mouth. And when the woman of Tekoa spoke to the king, she fell on her face to the ground and prostrated herself.
Good actors.
O king,
What troubles you?
indeed I am a widow. My husband is dead. Now your maidservant had 2 sons, and the 2 fought with each other in the field, and there was no one to part them. But the one struck the other and killed him. And now the whole family has risen up against your maidservant, and they said, deliver him who struck his brother, that we may execute him for the life of his brother whom he killed, and we will destroy the heir also. So they would extinguish my ember that is left, and leave to my husband neither name nor remnant on the earth.
Go to your house, and I will give orders concerning you.
My lord, O king, let the iniquity be on me and on my father's house, and the king and his throne be guiltless.
Whoever says anything to you, bring him to me, and he shall not touch you anymore.
Please let the king remember the Lord your God, and do not permit the avenger of blood to destroy any more, lest they destroy my son.
As the Lord lives, not one hair of your son shall fall to the ground.
Please, let your maidservant speak another word to my lord the king.
Say on.
Why then have you schemed such a thing against the people of God? For the king speaks this thing as one who is guilty, in that the king does not bring his banished one home again. For we will surely die and become like water spilled on the ground, which cannot be gathered up again. Yet God does not take away a life, but he devises means so that his banished ones are not expelled from him. Now therefore, I have come to speak of this thing to my lord the king, because the people have made me afraid. And your maidservant said, I will now speak to the king. It may be that the king will perform the request of his maidservant. For the king will hear and deliver his maidservant from the hand of the man who would destroy me and my son together from the inheritance of God. Your maidservant said, the word of my lord the king will now be comforting. For as the angel of God, so is my lord the king in discerning good and evil. And may the Lord your God be with you.
Please do not hide from me anything that I ask you.
Please, let my lord the king speak.
Is the hand of Joab with you in all this?
As you live, my lord the king, no one can turn to the right hand or to the left from anything that my lord the king has spoken. For your servant Joab commanded me, and he put all these words in the mouth of your maidservant. To bring about this change of affairs, your servant Joab has done this thing. But my lord is wise, according to the wisdom of the angel of God,
to know everything that is in the earth.
And the king said to Joab,
All right. I have granted this thing. Go therefore, bring back the young man Absalom.
Then Joab fell to the ground on his face and bowed himself and thanked the king.
Today, your servant knows that I have found favor in your sight, my lord, O king, and that the king has fulfilled the request of his servant.
So Joab arose and went to Geshur and brought Absalom to Jerusalem. And the king said,
Let him return to his own house, but do not let him see my face.
So Absalom returned to his own house, but did not see the king's face. Now in all Israel there was no one who was praised as much as Absalom for his good looks. From the sole of his foot to the crown of his head there was no blemish in him. And when he cut the hair of his head, at the end of every year he cut it, because it was heavy on him. When he cut it, he weighed the hair of his head at 200 shekels, according to the king's standard. To Absalom were born 3 sons and 1 daughter, whose name was Tamar. She was a woman of beautiful appearance. And Absalom dwelt 2 full years in Jerusalem, but did not see the king's face. Therefore Absalom sent for Joab to send him to the king, but he would not come to him. And when he sent again the second time, he would not come. So he said to his servants,
See, Joab's field is near mine, and he has barley there. Go and set it on fire.
And Absalom's servants set the field on fire. Then Joab arose and came to Absalom's house.
Why have your servant set my field on fire?
Look, I sent to you, saying, Come here, so that I may send you to the king, to say, Why have I come to the future? It would be better for me to be there still. Now, therefore, let me see the king's face. But if there is iniquity in me, let him execute me.
So Joab went to the king and told him. When he had called for Absalom, he came to the king and bowed himself on his face to the ground before the king. Then the king kissed Absalom.
How do you get that last little? Joab's scheme. The schemes, deception all through this stuff. It's like a soap opera, just like they said. Joab perceives that David longs for Absalom, his son who is in exile after killing his half-brother Amnon. Joab devises a plan to use a wise woman from Tekoa to persuade David to reconcile with Absalom. The woman from Tekoa's parable. The woman from Tekoa, acting as a messenger, presents a fictitious parable to David. In the parable, she recounts the story of 2 sons, one who killed the other, and the family's desire for justice and reconciliation. The woman appeals to David's sense of mercy and justice, urging him to bring Absalom back from exile. 3, David's response. David, touched by the woman's story, promises to ensure Absalom's safety if he returns to Jerusalem. David acknowledges that he will not hold a grudge against Absalom for his action and agrees to allow him to come back to the city. David was extremely compassionate. Very compassionate on people. Very. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Absalom's return. Joab brings Absalom back to Jerusalem, and David permits him to return to his own house, but refuses to see him face to face. Though David allows Absalom to return, he remains estranged from him. Absalom's handsomeness. I should have put Sean's handsomeness. The narrative emphasizes Absalom's striking appearance and describes his beauty, particularly his long, thick hair. Absalom's children. The chapter concludes by mentioning that Absalom has 3 sons and 1 daughter named Tamar after his sister. Anybody have anything to say about 14? Are we good? Let's let the chaos continue. By the way, we're going to read all of Samuel.
After this, it happened that Absalom provided himself with chariots and horses, and 50 men to run before him. Now Absalom would rise early and stand beside the way to the gate. So it was, whenever anyone who had a lawsuit came to the king for a decision, that Absalom would call to him and say,
What city are you from?
and he would say,
Your servant is from such and such a tribe of Israel.
then Absalom would say to him,
Look, your case is good and right, but there is no deputy of the king to hear you. Oh, that I were made judge in the land, and everyone who has any suit or cause would come to me, then I would give him justice.
and so it was, whenever anyone came near to bow down to him, that he would put out his hand and take him and kiss him. In this manner Absalom acted toward all Israel who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. Now it came to pass, after 40 years, that Absalom said to the king,
Please, let me go to Hebron and pay the vow which I made to the Lord. For your servant took a vow while I dwelt at Geshur in Syria, saying, If the Lord indeed brings me back to Jerusalem, then I will serve the Lord.
and the king said to him,
Go in peace.
So he arose and went to Hebron. Then Absalom sent spies throughout all the tribes of Israel.
As soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then you shall say, Absalom reigns in Hebron.
And with Absalom went 200 men, invited from Jerusalem. And they went along innocently and did not know anything. Then Absalom sent for Ahithophel the Gilonite, David's counselor from his city, from Gilon, while he offered sacrifices. And the conspiracy grew strong, for the people with Absalom continually increased in number. Now a messenger came to David.
The hearts of the men of Israel are with Absalom.
So David said to all his servants who were with him at Jerusalem,
Arise, and let us flee, or we shall not escape from Absalom. Make haste to depart, lest he overtake us suddenly and bring disaster upon us, and strike the city with the edge of the sword. We are your servants, ready to do whatever my lord the king commands.
Then the king went out with all his household after him. But the king left 10 women, concubines, to keep the house. And the king went out with all the people after him, and stopped at the outskirts. Then all his servants passed before him. And all the Kerethites, all the Pelethites, and all the Gittites, 600 men who had followed him from Gath, passed before the king. Then the king said to Ittai the Gittite,
Why are you also going with us? Return and remain with the king. For you are a foreigner and also an exile from your own place. In fact, you came only yesterday. Should I make you wander up and down with us today, since I go I know not where? Return and take your brethren back. Mercy and truth be with you.
As the Lord lives, and as my lord the king lives, surely in whatever place my lord the king shall be, whether in death or life, even there also your servant will be.
Go and cross over.
Then Ittai the Gittite and all his men and all the little ones who were with him crossed over. And all the country wept with a loud voice, and all the people crossed over. The king himself also crossed over the brook Kidron. And all the people crossed over toward the way of the wilderness. There was Zadok also, and all the Levites with him, bearing the ark of the covenant of God. And they set down the ark of God, and Abiathar went up until all the people had finished crossing over from the city. Then the king said to Zadok,
Carry the ark of God back into the city. If I find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me back and show me both it and his dwelling place. But if he says thus, I have no delight in you, here I am. Let him do to me as seems good to him. Are you not a seer? Return to the city in peace, and your 2 sons with you, Ahimaaz your son, and Jonathan the son of Abiathar. See, I will wait in the plains of the wilderness until word comes from you to inform me.
Therefore Zadok and Abiathar carried the ark of God back to Jerusalem, and they remained there. So David went up by the ascent of the Mount of Olives, and wept as he went up. And he had his head covered, and went barefoot. And all the people who were with him covered their heads, and went up, weeping as they went up. Then someone told David,
Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. O Lord, I pray, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness.
Now it happened, when David had come to the top of the mountain, where he worshipped God, there was Hushai the Archite coming to meet him, with his robe torn and dust on his head. David said to him,
If you go on with me, then you will become a burden to me. But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, I will be your servant, O king, as I was your father's servant previously, so I will now be your servant. Then you may defeat the counsel of Ahithophel from me. And do you not have Zadok and Abiathar the priests with you there? Therefore, it will be that wherever you hear from the king's house, you shall tell to Zadok and Abiathar the priests. Indeed, they have there with them their 2 sons, Ahimaaz, Zadok's son, and Jonathan, Abiathar's son. And by them you shall send me everything you hear.
So Hushai, David's friend, went into the city, and Absalom came into Jerusalem.
Well, let's look at some key points. Absalom's conspiracy. Now, there's so much stuff. Absalom, with strategic cunning and ambition, starts to build a following among the people of Israel. He stands by the city gate, intercepts those coming to seek justice from the king, and wins their favor by expressing sympathy for their grievances. Absalom subtly undermines David's reign by sowing seeds of discontent and implying that he would provide better justice if he were in charge. Absalom's oath and deception, verse 7 through 12. Absalom, making a vow to go to Hebron and offer sacrifices, he requests permission from David, suggesting it as a religious obligation. However, this is a ruse, and once in Hebron, Absalom began to implement his plan to overthrow David's rule. David flees Jerusalem. A messenger arrives in Jerusalem informing David of Absalom's conspiracy and the growing support for his rebellion. Recognizing the imminent danger, David decides to flee the city with his household, officials, and loyal followers. The priests Zadok and Abiathar bring the Ark of the Covenant with them, but David instructs them to return it to the city, trusting God's will. David acceptance of God's will. As David ascends the Mount of Olives, he receives news that his trusted counselor, I need your help, Christine, Ahithophel, okay, that sounds good, has joined Absalom's conspiracy. David prays that God will thwart Ahithophel's counsel. David is also met by Hushai, a friend and loyal supporter who offers to remain and provide intelligence against Absalom. I can't read that. Okay, David encounters Ittai, a foreigner from Gath, who pledges his allegiance to David and insists on accompanying him, even though David encourages him to stay behind. Ittai's loyalty deeply moves David. So much going on. Does anybody have anything to say about chapter 15? We're going to go along with the whole journey. So, if not, we're going to go to 16.
When David was a little past the top of the mountain, there was Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, who met him with a couple of sad donkeys, and on them 200 loaves of bread, 100 clusters of raisins, 100 summer fruits, and a skin of wine. And the king said to Ziba,
"What do you mean to do with these?"
The donkeys are for the king's household to ride on, the bread and summer fruit for the young men to eat, and the wine for those who are faint in the wilderness to drink.
And where is your master's son?
Indeed, he is staying in Jerusalem, for he said, 'Today the house of Israel will restore the kingdom of my father to me.'"
Here, all that belongs to Mephibosheth is yours.
I humbly bow before you, that I may find favor in your sight, my lord, O king.
Now when King David came to the Hurim, there was a man from the family of the house of Saul, whose name was Shimei, the son of Gera, coming from there. He came up, cursing continuously as he came, and he threw stones at David, and at all the servants of King David. And all the people and all the mighty men were on his right hand and on his left. Also Shimei said thus when he cursed,
Come out, you bloodthirsty man, you rogue! The Lord has brought upon you all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. And the Lord has delivered the kingdom into the hand of Absalom, your son. So now you are caught in your own evil, because you are a bloodthirsty man.
Then Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, said to the king,
Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Please, let me come over and take off his head.
What have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? So let him curse, because the Lord has said to him, Curse David. Who then shall say, Why have you done so? See how my son, who came from my own body, seeks my life. How much more now may this Benjamite? Let him alone, and let him curse, for so the Lord has ordered him. It may be that the Lord will look on my affliction, and that the Lord will repay me with good for his cursing this day.
And as David and his men went along the road, Shimei went along the hillside opposite him, and cursed as he went, threw stones at him, and kicked up dust. Now the king and all the people who were with him became weary, so they refreshed themselves there. Meanwhile, Absalom and all the people, the men of Israel, came to Jerusalem, and Ahithophel was with him. And so it was when Hushai the Archite, David's friend, came to Absalom, that Hushai said to Absalom,
Long live the king! Long live the king!
So Absalom said to Hushai,
Is this your loyalty to your friend? Why did you not go with your friend?
No, but whom the Lord and his people and all the men of Israel choose, his I will be, and with him I will remain. Furthermore, whom should I serve? Should I not serve in the presence of his son? As I am served in your father's presence, so will I be in your presence.
Then Absalom said to Ahithophel,
Give advice as to what we should do.
Go into your father's concubines, for he has left to keep the house, and all Israel will hear that you are abhorred by your father. Then the hands of all who are with you will be strong.
So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the top of the house. And Absalom went in to his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. Now the advice of Ahithophel, which he gave in those days, was as if one had inquired at the oracle of God. So was all the advice of Ahithophel, both with David and with Absalom.
It's just, I mean, it's just one thing after the next, after the next. It's like watching a soap opera. I literally can hear Grandmammy now. Tina was with Billy, and Billy, how dare them?
But this is God's people.
Yes.
This is the thing. This is not the world.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's not. Man, we needed Yeshua for sure. We need Yeshua for sure. But even with the new covenant and the Spirit, and we need to be baptized and be walking in the Spirit every single day.
Yeah.
And I'll share my story a little bit later about my week and what happens when you don't walk in the Spirit. You do things that you definitely don't want to do, for sure. All right, we're not going to go through that. That was pretty self-explanatory. All right, we're going to go to 17. So remember, he's writing in his diary all within all this. He's writing, lamenting, still trusting in God.
Moreover, Ahithophel said to Absalom,
Now, let me choose 12,000 men, and I will arise and pursue David tonight. I will come upon him while he is weary and weak, and make him afraid. And all the people who are with him will flee, and I will strike only the king. Then I will bring back all the people to you. When all return, except the man whom you seek, all the people will be at peace.
and the saying pleased Absalom and all the elders of Israel. Then Absalom said,
Now call Hushai the Archite also, and let us hear what he says too.
And when Hushai came to Absalom, Absalom spoke to him.
Ahithophel has spoken in this manner. Shall we do as he says? If not, speak up.
The advice that Ahithophel has given is not good at this time. For you know your father and his men, that they are mighty men, and they are enraged in their minds like a bear robbed of her cubs in the field. And your father is a man of war, and will not camp with the people. Surely by now he is hidden in some pit or in some other place. And it will be, when some of them are overthrown at the first, that whoever hears it will say, there is a slaughter among the people who follow Absalom. And even he who is valiant, whose heart is like the heart of a lion, will melt completely. For all Israel knows that your father is a mighty man, and those who are with him are valiant men. Therefore, I advise that all Israel be fully gathered to you, from Dan to Beersheba, like the sand that is by the sea for multitude, and that you go to battle in person. So we will come upon him in some place where he may be found, and we will fall on him as the dew falls on the ground. And of him and all the men who are with him, there shall not be left so much as one. Moreover, if he is withdrawn into a city, then all Israel shall bring ropes to that city, and we will pull it into the river until there is not one small stone found there.
So Absalom and all the men of Israel said,
The advice of Hushai the Archite is better than the advice of Ahithophel.
For the Lord had purposed to defeat the good advice of Ahithophel, to the intent that the Lord might bring disaster on Absalom. Then Hushai said to Zadok and Abiathar the priests,
Thus and so Ahithophel advised Absalom and the elders of Israel, and thus and so I have advised. Now, therefore, send quickly and tell David, saying, Do not spend this night in the plains of the wilderness, but speedily cross over, lest the king and all the people who are with him be swallowed up.
Now Jonathan and Ahimaaz stayed at En-Rogel, for they dared not be seen coming into the city. So a female servant would come and tell them, and they would go and tell King David. Nevertheless, a lad saw them and told Absalom. But both of them went away quickly and came to a man's house in Bethuel, who had a well in his court, and they went down into it. Then the woman took and spread a cover over the well's mouth, and spread ground grain on it, and the thing was not known. And when Absalom's servants came to the woman of the house, they said,
Where are Ahimaaz and Jonathan?
They have gone over the water brook.
and when they had searched and could not find them, they returned to Jerusalem. Now it came to pass, after they had departed, that they came up out of the well, and went and told King David.
Arise and cross over the water quickly, for thus has Ahithophel advised against you.
So David and all the people who were with him arose and crossed over the Jordan. By morning light, not one of them was left who had not gone over the Jordan. Now when Ahithophel saw that his advice was not followed, he saddled a donkey and arose and went home to his house, to his city. Then he put his household in order and hanged himself and died. And he was buried in his father's tomb. Then David went to Mahanaim, and Absalom crossed over the Jordan, he and all the men of Israel with him. And Absalom made Amasa captain of the army instead of Joab. This Amasa was the son of a man whose name was Jephthah, an Israelite, who had gone in to Abigail, the daughter of Nahash, sister of Zeruiah, Joab's mother. So Israel and Absalom encamped in the land of Gilead. Now it happened when David had come to Mahanaim that Shobai, the son of Nahash from Rabbah, of the people of Ammon, Machir, the son of Amiel from Lo-debar, and Barzillai, the Gileadite, from Rodan, brought beds and basins, earthen vessels and wheat, barley and flour, parched grain and beans, lentils and parched seeds, honey and curds, sheep and cheese of the herd, for David and the people who were with him to eat. For they said,
The people are hungry and weary and thirsty in the wilderness.
So I felt led this week to just go on this journey in Samuel. So that's why we're going through all the scripture. I think everything's pretty much speaking to what's going on. I don't think we need really the deep dive. It's pretty much explaining what's happening. I think that's why God wanted me to go this route. And then at the end, we're going to talk about Psalms for a second. And then I'll share my experience. Remind me of that because I don't want to go without that. So let's just go to 17, and then we'll go through something else when we get to 19.
Moreover, Ahithophel said to Absalom,
Now, let me choose 12,000 men, and I
Can we just do
will
this?
rise and pursue
I was
David.
checking to see if you guys were paying attention. I was like looking at it like, didn't we just read that?
And David numbered the people who were with him, and sent captains of thousands and captains of hundreds over them. Then David sent out 1/3 of the people under the hand of Joab, 1/3 under the hand of Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, and 1/3 under the hand of Ittai, the Gittite.
I also will surely go out with you myself.
But the people answered,
You shall not go out, for if we flee away, they will not care about us, nor if half of us die will they care about us.
But you are worth 10,000 of us now, for you are now more help to us in the city.
What?
Do you think if David would have went out, what's about to happen would have happened?
I don't know.
They pretty much convinced him to stay, which is legit. I mean, what they said was correct.
Whatever seems best to you, I will do.
So the king stood beside the gate, and all the people went out by hundreds and by thousands. Now the king had commanded Joab, Abishai, and Ittai,
Deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom.
and all the people heard when the king gave all the captains orders concerning Absalom. So the people people went out into the field of battle against Israel. And the battle was in the woods of Ephraim. The people of Israel were overthrown before the servants of David. And a great slaughter of 20,000 took place there that day. For the battle there was scattered over the face of the whole countryside, and the woods devoured more people that day than the sword devoured. Then Absalom met the servants of David. Absalom rode on a mule. The mule went under the thick boughs of a great terebinth tree, and his head caught in the terebinth. So he was left hanging between heaven and earth, and the mule which was under him went on. Now a young man saw it and told Joab.
I just saw Absalom hanging in a terebinth tree.
You just saw him? And why did you not strike him there to the ground? I would have given you 10 shekels of silver and a belt.
Though I were to receive 1,000 shekels of silver in my hand, I would not raise my hand against the king's son. For in our hearing, the king commanded you and Abishai and Idai, saying, beware lest anyone touch the young man Absalom. Otherwise, I would have dealt falsely against my own life. For there is nothing hidden from the king, and you yourself would have set yourself against me. I cannot linger with you.
And he took 3 spears in his hand and thrust them through Absalom's heart while he was still alive in the midst of the terebinth tree. And 10 young men who bore Joab's armor surrounded Absalom and struck and killed him. So Joab blew the trumpet, and the people returned from pursuing Israel. But Joab held back the people, and they took Absalom and cast him into a large pit in the woods, and made a very large heap of stones over him. Then all Israel fled, everyone to his tent. Now Absalom in his lifetime had taken and set up a pillar for himself, which is in the king's valley. For he said,
I have no son to keep my name in remembrance.
He called the pillar after his own name, and to this day it is called Absalom's monument. Then Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok, said,
Let me run now and take the news to the king. Now the Lord has avenged him of his enemies.
And Joab said to him,
You shall not take the news this day, for you shall take the news another day. But today you shall take no news, because the king's son is dead.
Then Joab said to the Cushite,
Go, tell the king what you have seen.
So the Cushite bowed himself to Joab and ran. And Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok, said again to Joab,
But whatever happens, please let me also run after the Cushite.
Why will you run, my son, since you have no news ready?
But whatever happens, let me run.
Run.
Then Ahimaaz ran by way of the plain and outran the Cushite. Now David was sitting between the 2 gates. And the watchman went up to the roof over the gate, to the wall, lifted his eyes and looked. And there was a man running alone. Then the watchman cried out and told the king. And the king said,
If he is alone, there is news in his mouth.
And he came rapidly and drew near. Then the watchman saw another man running, and the watchman called to the gatekeeper and said,
There is another man running alone.
He also brings news.
I think the running of the first is like the running of Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok.
He is a good man and comes with good news.
So Ahimaaz called out and said to the king,
All is well.
down with his face to the earth before the king.
Blessed be the Lord your God, who has delivered up the men who raised their hand against my lord the king.
Is the young man Absalom safe?
When Joab sent the king's servant, and me, your servant, I saw a great tumult, but I did not know what it was about.
Turn aside and stand here.
So he turned aside and stood still. Just then the Cushite came.
There is good news, my lord the king. For the Lord has avenged you this day of all those who rose against you. Is the young man Absalom safe?
May the enemies of my lord the king and all who rise against you to do harm be like that young man.
Then the king was deeply moved, and went up to the chamber over the gate, and wept. And as he went, he said thus,
Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died in your place. Oh, Absalom, my son, oh.
Have we seen this compassion with David before? Not just with somebody in his family, it was like that with Saul as well. Saul was out to kill him, and he still had compassion on Saul. David was very, very compassionate. All right, let's go to the same one we just did. No, let's go to 19. We're going to stop here for a second after this.
and Joab was told,
Behold, the king is weeping and mourning for Absalom.
So the victory that day was turned into mourning for all the people. For the people heard it said that day,
The king is grieved for his son.
and the people stole back into the city that day, as people who are ashamed steal away when they flee in battle. But the king covered his face, and the king cried out with a loud voice,
Oh, my son Absalom. Oh, Absalom, my son.
Then Joab came into the house to the king.
Today, you have disgraced all your servants, who today have saved your life, the lives of your sons and daughters, the lives of your wives, and the lives of your concubines, in that you love your enemies and hate your friends. For you have declared today that you regard neither princes nor servants. For today, I perceive that if Absalom had lived, and all of us had died today, then it would have pleased you well. Now, therefore, arise. Go out and speak comfort to your servants. For I swear by the Lord, if you do not go out, not one will stay with you this night. And that will be worse for you than all the evil that has befallen you from your youth until now.
Then the king arose and sat in the gate. And they told all the people,
There is the king, sitting in the gate.
So all the people came before the king, for every one of Israel had fled to his tent. Now all the people were in a dispute throughout all the tribes of Israel.
The king saved us from the hand of our enemies. He delivered us from the hand of the Philistines. And now he has fled from the land because of Absalom.
But Absalom, whom we anointed over us, has died in battle. Now therefore, why do you say nothing about bringing back the king?
So King David sent to Zadok and Abiathar the priests.
Speak to the elders of Judah, saying, Why are you the last to bring the king back to his house, since the words of all Israel have come to the king, to his very house? You are my brethren. You are my bone and my flesh. Why then are you the last to bring back the king? And say to Amasa, Are you not my bone and my flesh? God, do so to me, and you are not commander of the army before me continually in place of Joab.
So he swayed the hearts of all the men of Judah, just as the heart of one man, so that they sent this word to the king.
Return, you and all your servants.
Then the king returned and came to the Jordan. And Judah came to Gilgal to go to meet the king, to escort the king across the Jordan. And Shimei, the son of Gera, a Benjamite, who was from Jehoram, hurried and came down with the men of Judah to meet King David. There were 1,000 men of Benjamin with him, and Ziba, the servant of the house of Saul, and his 15 sons and his 20 servants with him. And they went over the Jordan before the king. Then a ferry boat went across to carry over the king's household, and to do what he thought good. Now Shimei, the son of Gera, fell down before the king when he had crossed the Jordan.
Do not let my lord impute iniquity to me, or remember what wrong your servant did on the day that my lord the king left Jerusalem, that the king should take it to heart. For I, your servant, know that I have sinned. Therefore, here I am, the first to come today of all the house of Joseph to go down to meet my lord the king.
But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, answered,
Shall not Shimei be put to death for this, because he cursed the Lord's anointed?
And David said,
What have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah, that you should be adversaries to me today? Shall any man be put to death today in Israel? For do I not know that today I am king over Israel?
Therefore the king said to Shimei,
You shall not die.
and the king swore to him. Now Mephibosheth, the son of Saul, came down to meet the king. And he had not cared for his feet, nor trimmed his mustache, nor washed his clothes from the day the king departed until the day he returned in peace. So it was, when he had come to Jerusalem to meet the king, that the king said to him,
Why did you not go with me, Mephibosheth?
My lord, O king, my servant deceived me. For your servant said, I will saddle a donkey for myself, that I may ride on it and go to the king, because your servant is lame. And he has slandered your servant to my lord the king. But my lord the king is like an angel of God. Therefore do what is good in your eyes. For all my father's house were but dead men before my lord the king. Yet you set your servant among those who eat at your own table. Therefore, what right have I still to cry out any more to the king?
Why do you speak any more of your matters? I have said you and Ziba divide the land.
Rather, let him take it all, inasmuch as my lord the king has come back in peace to his own house.
And Barzillai, the Gileadite, came down from Rogan and went across the Jordan with the king to escort him across the Jordan. Now Barzillai was a very aged man, 80 years old, and he had provided the king with supplies while he stayed at Mahanaim, for he was a very rich man. And the king said to Barzillai,
Come across with me, and I will provide for you while you are with me in Jerusalem.
How long have I to live, that I should go up with the king to Jerusalem? I am today 80 years old. Can I discern between the good and bad? Can your servant taste what I eat or what I drink? Can I hear any longer the voice of singing men and singing women? Why then should your servant be a further burden to my lord the king? Your servant will go a little way across the Jordan with the king, and why should the king repay me with such a reward? Please let your servant turn
stone sitting near the grave of my father and mother. But here is your servant Kimham. Let him cross over with my lord the king, and do for him what seems good to you.
Kimham shall cross over with me, and I will do for him what seems good to you. Now whatever you request of me, I will do for you.
Then all the people went over the Jordan. And when the king had crossed over, the king kissed Barzillai and blessed him, and he returned to his own place.
So do you notice the characteristics of David? He's merciful, he shows compassion, he offers forgiveness and kindness. All characteristics of being a man after God's own heart. Now let's continue.
Now the king went on to Gilgal, and Kimham went on with him. And all the people of Judah escorted the king, and also half the people of Israel. Just then, all the men of Israel came to the king.
Why have our brethren, the men of Judah, stolen you away and brought the king, his household, and all David's men with him across the Jordan?
So all the men of Judah answered the men of Israel.
Because the king is a close relative of ours. Why then are you angry over this matter? Have we ever eaten at the king's expense? Or has he given us any gift?
And the men of Israel answered the men of Judah.
We have 10 shares in the king. Therefore, we also have more right to David than you. Why then do you despise us? Were we not the first to advise bringing back our king?
Yet the words of the men of Judah were fiercer than the words of the men of Israel.
Alright, so David's grief and Joab's rebuke. David's mourning for Absalom dampens the joy of his victory. Joab confronts David, urging him to acknowledge the efforts of his loyal supporters. David appoints Amasa as commander of his army, replacing Joab. David's return to Jerusalem. David decides to return to Jerusalem, and the people of Judah welcome him back. This triggers tension with the northern tribes who supported Absalom. David's reconciliation with Shimei, who had cursed David during his earlier escape, seeks forgiveness upon David's return, and David pardons him. And I am not about to miss my explanation. Where you at, Christine? How do you say it? Oh, okay, that'll work. That sounds good. That person clarifies to David that Ziba had deceived him, and David decides to divide the land between them. Conflict between Judah and Israel. The return of David leads to strife between the tribes of Judah and Israel over his reinstatement as king. All right, so reading all this stuff, I started thinking about David's compassion and forgiving people. And so I remember watching this trial, and this gentleman went in and shot a bunch of people. Okay, so he asked for forgiveness. Okay, now you know, those of you who've been in prison ministry, I know Dad's been in prison ministry, and there's a lot of people that say that they've been changed or they did that. Sometimes it's just the system itself is just part of what they do. They read Bibles and stuff, but it doesn't really they make changes. But there are some people that truly make a change while they're in prison. Okay, so he asked for forgiveness. So it gets towards the end, and it was brutal. I mean, what he did was horrible. But at the very end, at any court proceeding, they always have the people that were involved, like their family members or whatever, who was killed or whatever. They would come up and they'll do a statement talking to him. Okay, so he asked for forgiveness. Okay, so there's a bunch of people got up and they said what they had to say, and then this one lady got up and she just like, I hope you rot in hell. I hope that they come and eat you alive. I hope they do all this stuff while you're in prison. It was just complete hate. Now I'm just telling you, I don't know how I would be in that situation. I would hope that I would act the right way. However, just going off, just saying every possible bad thing you could possibly say to an individual. So then a couple more people came up. They said what they had to say. And then there was this one older lady who came up and she said, And she started crying. And she looked at him and she goes, I forgive you. And that did more to me than the hatred that everybody had for them. He asked for forgiveness. Now, whether he meant it or not, he asked for forgiveness. And the hatred that you give back to somebody else, I don't think that's godly. I really don't. Again, I don't know how I would do if somebody killed my kids or somebody did. I don't know how I would act. But how would God want you to act? Would he want you to be complete hatred? I mean, I got sick. I literally got sick listening to this lady talk about, you rotten. I mean, you should want him to get right. You shouldn't want him to rot in hell. You should want to be able to forgive him, because really it has nothing to do with him. It has to do with that individual being free, because if they don't allow them to be free, they're going to hold that their whole life. They're going to hold on to that scenario their whole life, and it's going to affect them. It's going to be... So forgiveness. David had no problem forgiving people. I mean, he even took care of, Saul's kids and made sure that they were taken care of. Most people, if they went to Charles Manson's house, their kids would be looked at like Charles Manson. That's just the way we do it. But just because they have the last name of Manson, or just because somebody wears a turban, or somebody from another country, and doesn't mean that they're a terrorist or something. But we do not have, a lot of us don't have the characteristics of God. When we can forgive an enemy, they were actually mad that he was forgiving, that he was being compassionate towards. It's just crazy. David had a heart for God, and his characteristics, he tried to make his characteristics be like God. I think that's awesome. That's what got me most about David in this whole scenario. But what did he not do? Some of this might not have happened if he would have just did the issue right in the beginning, like dealt with it. Yes, definitely, for sure. We're going to go just a summary of the Psalms. All right, so Psalms 32 celebrates the blessedness of forgiveness and emphasizes the importance of confession and repentance. So remember, this was all written in between the time period of Samuel. This is what David is writing. 90% of it is David. Psalm 51 reflects David's deep repentance after his sin with Bathsheba, pleading for God's mercy, cleansing, and the renewal of clean heart. So here's the thing. If God can forgive you, he wants you to do the same to other people that come to you. It doesn't matter what they've done. They've done the most egregious thing in the world. But if they come to you and ask for repentance or forgiveness and repentance, we should offer the same thing. Psalm 86, a heartfelt cry for God's help, acknowledging divine attributes, expressing trust, and seeking guidance in the times of trouble. Psalms 122 celebrates the joy of worship and unity in Jerusalem, includes prayers for peace and prosperity, and emphasizing the significance of God's presence. Psalms 28, a plea for God's assistance and protection, expressing trust and reliance on God as the source of strength. All right, and then finish off with these. Psalms 40 acknowledges God's faithfulness and salvation, expressing a willingness to God's will and proclaiming God's righteousness. Psalm 58, a psalm expressing lament and a call for God's justice against the wicked. Highlight the righteous judgment of God. Highlighting the right. Okay, Psalm 61, a prayer for God's refuge and protection, expressing a desire to dwell in God's tent and find shelter under his wings. Psalm 62, emphasizing trust in God alone, describing him as a rock in salvation, contrasting human frailty with divine strength. Psalm 64, a psalm of lament and a plea for protection from the schemes of the wicked, seeking God's intervention and justice. So my question to you is, what would be your diary? What would be written in your diary the last week? Would your entries be complaining? Would it be, I did this, I did that? Would it be lamenting? Would it be talking what would your diary look like? I can tell you that I had a week when my diary would have been nothing but complaining and nothing but being in anger, to the point where I got so upset and I had to repent in front of my kids. I had to call my boss because my boss got on the phone. There's a lot of changes going on at work. A lot. Can somebody stop that for me, please?
You want something?
I get it. There's a lot of stuff going on at work. So I know if any of you guys watch the news, a lot of big companies